Good morning, Mike and Phil.
Hey.
My question is from Ephesians chapter 4 about coarse jesting. Two-part question. One is, what is it? What does it look like? And the second part is, I can say, oh, I'm not like that. What is the heart behind coarse jesting? What are the thoughts, beliefs, attitudes that tempt us in that sense?
Yeah, that is a really good question. And in fact, I have a whole message on that subject that I did at the Shepherds Conference maybe 10 years ago from that very passage. And one of the things I point out, in that context, the Apostle Paul is talking about love and what genuine Christ-like love is compared to worldly concepts of love. And one of the things he mentions is coarse jesting. So why is it in this context, I ask? And I think the obvious answer is this is one of the badges of worldly camaraderie and fellowship. You get a bunch of young, worldly-minded young men together, and they're going to use bad language and tell dirty jokes, and that's their idea of expressing camaraderie and fellowship. But it's a corruption of the idea of love, and that's the point Paul is making there, that Christ-like love is not like that. It's pure, and it avoids, trashy topics and questionable words. And it's been a tendency among evangelicals, I think, for the past, well, there have been two waves of this. This came up maybe 15 years ago, and it's come up again in recent years. Well, the Bible doesn't give a list of forbidden words. No, but your mom could give them to you if my mom knew which words were forbidden. And how she knew that, I don't know, but it was a pretty clear-cut list of things that I would get smacked for if I said, and those are the things Paul is talking about there. He doesn't have to give a list because we all know that, and then the question comes up, yeah, but here's a word that means this bad thing that I can use in polite company and nobody cringes, but if I use the four-letter version of that, then everybody says that's a bad word. Who arbitrarily decides? And the answer is society does, or it always has. And one of the severe corruptions in our generation is that because of the way bad language is so routinely used in popular entertainment and all that, people have become so accustomed to that there are literally people in our generation who they talk that way without even thinking. And some of them, sometimes they get converted, they come into the church. Those are hard habits to break. And Paul is dealing with a similar cultural phenomenon, I think, where people in Ephesus and Corinth and these Greek cultures like that had words that were taboo in polite society, but they were so accustomed to using it that sometimes even in the church, this sort of coarse jesting and bad language would flourish. My counsel is, if you're really confused about this and you're not sure what's appropriate and what's not, befriend one of the kindest, oldest women in our group and hang around her. She'll let you know when you're out of line.
Yeah, I think a lot of it in our culture has to do with sexual innuendo, right? And so there's always this sort of nudge, nudge, wink, wink at
or other bodily functions,
too.
Yeah,
right. Scatological
right.
type, I guess that's funny.
But the mention of it is funny.
Right. The context, immorality, impurity, or greed, and so those are the actions. But then they're saying, well, let's not even talk in a way that would be consistent with committing those actions. And then the second question is, okay, maybe I'm good at bridling my coarse jesting, but maybe it's in my heart. And that's the question that we always have to answer. It's not just that the outward commands are to be obeyed, but if you have a desire to disobey, your heart is wrong and you need forgiveness for that. And so, if you find those things constantly popping up in your mind, even though but I shouldn't say that, because I'll be looked down upon, or because it's just because God would be displeased with it. Nevertheless, if it's arising in your heart, you ask, why is it that my heart so naturally brings forth thoughts that way? What am I minding, right? What is my mind set on? Is my mind set on on the things of the Spirit or the things of the flesh? The mindset on the flesh is death, but the mindset on the Spirit is life and peace, right? Dwell on the praiseworthy things, not the things that are base and impure. And so if your mind is filled with truth, with loveliness, with Scripture, with the character of God, with the glories of the gospel, those are going to be the things that come out of your mouth and out of your heart. But if your mind is filled with the baseness of contemporary culture, then those are the things that are going to arise in your heart. And so you mortify sin really at the desire level, at the heart level, and not just at the hand level or the tongue level.
Yeah, one of the arguments you will inevitably get when you try to make this point or teach people these principles is, yeah, but the Bible itself has some expressions that seem to breach the rule we're making. Paul uses the word for dung in Philippians chapter 3, and in Galatians he says to these guys who are enthralled with the idea of circumcision that they should go even further, basically, and castrate themselves. And then there are some passages in the Old Testament where some pretty candid language is used. The thing is, those are extraordinary circumstances even in Scripture, and there's always a reason why that sort of very potent language is used. When Paul uses the word for dung, for example, he doesn't choose. There were worse words than the one he used that he could have chosen. He doesn't choose the worst words. He's trying to make a valid point about this concept, and it has a legitimate point. He's not just going for shock value. And that's the case every time you find anything like that in Scripture. And notice, Scripture is not peppered with stuff like that. It's always the guy who wants to talk like that all the time who points out those selected places in Scripture and says, that justifies his filthiness. It doesn't.